Welcome to tonight's forums for candidates seeking the House District 60 seat in the November 3rd general election. I'm Gary Castor, Managing Editor of the Jefferson City News Tribune, and I'll serve as moderator of tonight's forum. Before we begin, though, let's stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So again, welcome to tonight's forums for the House District 60 seat in the November 3rd general election. I want to take this opportunity to thank the city for the use of the council chambers for this forum, as well as JCTV for taping and airing the forum. We're streaming the forum on newstribune.com, and the forum will be broadcast on JCTV on later dates. I will add, the computer system that we are using tonight had an issue earlier today. In the event that this feed is lost, our backup plan is to go to Facebook Live event, and it'll be on our News Tribune Facebook page. So if this broadcast should end early, then I would encourage you to go to our Facebook page and find the Facebook Live event there. Prior to tonight, the candidates were advised the rules of the forum, which will include opening statements, general questions for the candidates, and then closing statements. Candidates will be given 1 minute for an opening statement. As we begin the questions, the candidates will have 2 minutes to respond to each question. Rebecca Martin, News Tribune City Editor, will serve as the timekeeper for the responses. During the course of the forum, I may ask a candidate a follow-up question in hopes of getting a clearer understanding of his stance. A candidate may also be granted time to respond or to rebut an answer from a previous question. None of the questions were shared with the candidates beforehand. Now, let me introduce the candidates for tonight's forum for District 60 seat. To my right is Dave Griffith. He's a U.S. veteran. He worked in television as an executive director of the local American Red Cross. Voters elected him to his first term in the Missouri House of Representatives in 2018. While in the chamber, he has championed veterans issues. To my left is Joshua Dunne. He's a contractor of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, where he does data collection and analysis, working hand in hand with farmers. He currently serves as chair of the Cole County Democratic Central Committee. The order of the opening and closing statements was determined before the forum by drawing lots. Joshua will start with his opening statement. Each candidate will be given 1 minute for that opening statement. So Joshua?
Hello, my name is Joshua Dunn. I am running for District 60 representative because when I looked at the legislature, I realized that people were not being represented completely. I look across the community of Jefferson City and I see a wide, diverse population of young people, people of color. And yet when I look at the legislature, I see mostly the same older white males. I'm running because our issues are not being heard. 62% of Missourians voted for fair elections, and yet we have to vote on it again in November with Amendment 3. We passed Medicaid expansion just less than 2 months ago, and we're told that night by the budget chair that he just won't fund it and it will go away. The voters have to be heard, and it's time that we had somebody who represented the voters and listened to them on the House floor in Jefferson City.
Thank you. Dave?
Yes, I'm State Representative Dave Griffith, and thank you, Gary, for hosting us, and thanks to News Tribune as well as JCTV. Art, you did a great job back there. I've been married, my wife Lee and I have been married for 47 years. We lived in Jefferson City for 34 years. We lived in our home in the historic east side of Jefferson City for the past 31 years. We raised our 2 children, Kimberly and Michael, here in Jefferson City. They both graduated from Jefferson City High School. We've been blessed with 5 grandchildren. As you said, I'm a veteran. I served in the 8th Special Forces Group And during my time with them, I jumped out of a perfectly good airplane 65 times, which may question my judgment. But I really am committed to this community and what we've been able to do here. This is a very loving community. And I've been able to listen to my constituents and what their needs are. And I think in the past 2 years, I've been able to do a good job for them and hope to continue that.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to begin our questions. Again, the candidates have 2 minutes to respond. Some of the questions I created, some of them come from our readers, and I'll try to note from whom the question comes if it's not from me. So this first question is a reader question. It comes from Christina Todea. She says, the Black Lives Matter movement has put a glaring spotlight on the mistreatment and racism faced by Black Americans in the U.S., as well as the lack of training and accountability found within some police departments nationwide. What kind of legislation and policies will you support in regards to institutionalized racism and law enforcement? Dave, you'll start.
Thank you for that question. I think that what we've been able to find through our, in the past 2 years, as far as justice reform, I think we've been able to make some strides there. 2020 was really an anomaly because we were cut short by 6 weeks and not being able to do a whole lot. But I think as far as Jefferson City goes, I think we're very blessed in the community we live in. I think that our police department does a really good job. I think that in the training that they do and what they've been able to accomplish, I think the surveys that are taken as far as what they call driving while black and how those numbers have gone, I think we're seeing those go down. I think we're doing that because we're opening up a line of communication between the community and between the police department. Community policing is something that we had in our community for a number of years. The big issue that we have is that a lot of police officers are not staying here because of what we pay them, the compensation they're getting. If we have those long-term police officers that have their own beat, they have their own neighborhood that they go in, they get to know them, they get to gain trust and build relationships. And I think that the more that we can do that, and the more that we can actually listen to what both sides are saying, and being able to have a meaningful conversation and really care about one another, I think that we can make a lot of strides in tearing down a lot of those barriers that we have, perceived barriers that we have. Here in Jefferson City, I'm not sure we have that many. Throughout the state, I think we've got quite a few. And I think that we can't legislate good behavior, but I think that we can have a really good conversation across the aisle to be able to try and bring forth meaningful legislation.
All right, thank you. Joshua?
Well, thank you for the question. This is such an important issue, and I, like many of you, watched the roughly 9-minute video of George Floyd being murdered. It struck me to the core, and it made me realize so much that I just take for granted as a white male. The Black Lives Matter activists just want to be treated with the same respect and dignity that white people take for granted. And that takes a time. The police in our state police force, I believe that we should teach de-escalation techniques while during orientation, during training, as well as refreshing every so often. We have to make sure that they're on the cutting edge to learn how to de-escalate to stop a situation from getting worse. Currently, right now, our system seems to be over-policing, which has proven not to stop violent crime and to encourage, in some ways, more systematic racism and injustice. They tend to go to the areas that they feel are unsafe. And because of conditions and what we've been told, that oftentimes is the black communities. And right now, our state legislature and our governor continue to use prejudicial statements and sometimes racist dog whistles to foster an us versus them mentality between the minority population and rural white America and rural white Missouri. And we have to start there. We have to change our language, and we have to get representatives that do not refuse to do that and refuse to fall into those traps. And Representative Griffith is right. Police officers are not paid enough for what we have them do. We expect them to be social workers and psychologists, as well as to serve and protect us. But we don't train them to do that, and we don't pay them to do that. To support the police by getting to help from police by sending social workers out, sending psychologists out when there is a crisis would be huge in stopping some of the violence that we see with police and the black community at large.
Thank you. All right, our next question, we'll start with Joshua. Excuse me. Patsy Johnson asked, specifically concerning women's reproductive health, should lawmakers have the right to make decisions that control people's ability to make medical decisions in reproductive matters, such as forced sterilization or a woman's right to choose to give birth or have an abortion?
The short answer is no, we shouldn't. Supreme Court precedent for the last 40 years has been a woman has the right to choose. I, as a cisgender white male, cannot begin to understand the magnitude of a decision like that. And therefore, I should not be trying to legislate that. For too long, we let certain arguments, a minority that is vocal to control policy, and that just cannot be the case. The abortion ban here in Missouri was so draconian that the president of the President Trump said it was too far. Not allowing a single exception for rape, incest, health of the mother, viability of the pregnancy, essentially turning women into living coffins if they're afraid to go to the doctor because they're afraid of prosecution. This has to stop. We have to stop controlling people's bodies and worry what's going on in our lives instead of trying to control everyone else's.
Thank you. Dave, same question.
Well, I can see we're going to disagree on this one because I'm a pro-life candidate. I've been endorsed by the Missouri Right to Life. I believe that life begins at conception. I believe that we have got to take care of the baby. We talk about the mother, but nobody has the baby's voice, and that's who I stand for. I stand for that unborn child, to give that unborn child an opportunity to have and to experience life. And if passing legislation can guarantee that we're going to do that, I'm all for that. I think that we've got to be able to provide alternative options for women to be able to have that baby. If they don't want that baby, there are a number of people that will adopt that baby. I think our community that we live in here feels the same way that I do. I think that we're looking for alternative ways. We have the Pregnancy Help Center that's here in Jefferson City, an event that we have, and they're getting ready to have their annual banquet at the end of this month. And the stories that are told there in that banquet of mothers that had thought about going and having an abortion, and sat down and talked with the counselor, and being able to find that there is an alternative for that, and being able to see that baby and see that it's alive. And for us to be able to want to allow legislation that would be passed where they can abort a baby at birth, that's just wrong. That's murder. And I'm a pro-life candidate, and I will stand by that.
All right.
Mr. Castor, may I have a chance to rebut a statement that he said?
Sure. You have 1 minute.
He says he's pro-life, but in reality he's pro-birth. His party doesn't support Medicaid expansion to provide health care to lower-income families that potentially may not take care of a child after it is born. His committee doesn't take in the health of the viability of the pregnancy or the health of the mother. Therefore, you're not pro-life. If you say life begins in conception, it has to continue on through the rest of their life. You can't just say until they're born. And since I support the Supreme Court decisions, I'm not advocating for children to be killed if they're killed after they're born. No one's advocating for that. What I am advocating for is that rapists do not have more rights than their victims. And that's what HB 126 does.
Dave, would you like to rebut?
I'd like to respond to that too.
Okay.
Pardon me. Are we going to talk about Medicaid expansion later on? Because
Yes,
if we are,
that's the
I want to
plan.
save what I'm going to have for Medicaid expansion later on. But if we're going to open that can of worms now, I'd be glad to address that. Our state budget, the one thing that we are fortunate that we have, and I'm not sure I can do this in 1 minute, Gary, but our state budget, we have $30 billion that we have in our state budget. Right now, $10 billion of that state budget is going towards Medicaid. We have 996,000 Missourians in the state of Missouri that are on Medicaid. We have a population in the state of 6 million. If we're looking at Medicaid expansion, and it passed, but one thing that you misquoted on is that Cody Smith said on the floor that had there been a vehicle or had there been an instrument in there to fund Medicaid expansion, it would have been fine. What we've got now is an unfunded mandate. And that is, in being able to put abortion in that same category is just not fair.
So to clarify, you're saying, because the rebuttal was regarding the abortion question, that you were saying that abortion would be an unfunded mandate?
Well, I'm saying that, no, Medicaid expansion is an unfunded mandate.
Okay.
He's putting abortion into that same category with Medicaid expansion, and I don't agree with.
I'm not. I'm saying that you're saying if you're saying you're pro-life, you need to support health care for people that are working poor, that work hard, yet can't afford health care. If you say you're pro-life, you have to be pro-life from birth to death.
Okay. We're going to go on to the next question. Dave, we'll start with you. Voters passed the Clean Missouri Amendment in 2018, changing the state's lobbying laws, campaign finance limits, and legislative redistricting process. Legislators have put Amendment 3 on the ballot, which would reverse parts of Clean Missouri. Do you support Amendment 3? Why or why not?
When we came to a vote in 2019 on the floor about bringing Amendment 3 back to the ballot, I voted no. I voted no because when I look at on my desk, I've got a computer and I can go on there and I can look and go to the Cole County Clerk's website and I can see how my voters voted. My voters voted over 60% in favor of Amendment 1. Had they voted closer, then I might have been able to say, and I'll be able to tell you why I voted, because I did tell my voters when I knocked the doors, I'm not always going to vote the way you want to, but I'll be able to tell you why. At 60%, at 60-40, I didn't feel like I could do that. So I abided by what my constituents and how they voted. When it came to the floor again this year, I voted no again because of the same reason. Now, do I believe that Amendment 3 is a good thing? Yes, I do. And the reason I think it's a good idea is because you talk about the Black Lives Matter. When we get into the inner city, into St. Louis and Kansas City, if we look at redistricting and we want to redistrict those areas, the black community is going to be disenfranchised. They're going to lose their representation. The way it's set up right now is districts are contiguous, so they're close, so that the constituents can be in touch with their representative and they can talk directly with them. They can get to know them. But if we have spaghetti districts, as been talked about, what's going to happen? We can have a district that can run from St. Louis all the way to Warrenton, maybe all the way to Columbia, and have a very thin line. That's not representation. And I feel like that the voters need to be able to talk with their legislators. Living here in Jefferson City, I have constituents that come to my office and they call and talk to me all the time about concerns that they've got. And I think that if we go this route, it's not going to be good for them.
All right. Joshua, same question.
Amendment 3, or Dirty Missouri, is a clear case of the supermajority worried that they're going to lose their power that they hold in Jefferson City. Amendment 3 will lead to the worst gerrymandering that the United States has seen since the Jim Crow era Mississippi. It's allowing the state legislature, the elected officials, to choose their voters instead of letting voters choose them. It is insulting that we've heard that we did not know what we were voting for. 1.4 million Missourians did not know what we were voting for. Over 60% of people in Jefferson City, we've been told, didn't know what we were voting for. Dave has previously said that he thought they may have been voting for clean water, which once again is insulting to think that we don't know what's going to be on the ballot and we're that misinformed. Redistricting will allow black communities not to lose power, but to gain power. So they're not segregated so they can contain the black representation that we currently have into certain areas. That's what that does. If by expanding districts, by putting like communities, by allowing a professional demographer whose job is to draw districts continuous districts, who do this all the time, to say that they're going to try to fraud the system or draw districts from St. Louis to Columbia is disingenuous and misleading. That will not happen. We need to stop with the misleading tactics. We just do. He says he voted no, but he says he supports Clean Missouri, which means that his vote on the House floor was pure theatrics because he knew the supermajority in power would cover him, and he could continue to do his work in the darkness. Representative Griffith says he listens to his constituents, but time after time, he says he listens to them and then votes differently. Listening entails hearing and acting upon what they're supposed to do. And while he may hear them, he does not act the way he says he's going to act or the way he promises that he will act.
You know, Gary, I've got to respond to that.
Amanda?
You know, when we have debate on the floor, we try and keep it to where it's not personal, and we don't attack our other legislators. And I feel like this has been an attack. I don't use theatrics. That's not who I am as a person. And for Joshua to say that I do not listen to my constituents, he doesn't know me. We've met twice. He doesn't know who I am. He doesn't know what I stand for. My dad was a Methodist preacher. He raised 3 boys. And when he raised us and told us that we are called to serve our fellow man. That's what God calls us to do every day. And every day when I go to the Capitol, and I'm at the Capitol almost every day, I'm there to listen to my constituents and to do what they have elected me to do. And that's what I intend to do when I'm reelected on November 3rd.
All right, gentlemen, I'm going to say at this point, I'm going to remind us why we're here. The reason why we're here is to clearly delineate what your role, what your stands are, to educate voters on where you stand, what you believe, and so we're gonna move on to the next topic. And I would just ask that we stick with the topic. It is certainly fine to question stands folks have made, but let's keep this professional. All right, so Joshua, we're going to start with you. In 2018, a St. Louis area legislator sponsored a bill to increase its funding to Lincoln University and St. Louis's Harris Stowe University to make up for past underfunding of the 2 historically black colleges. Lincoln is a federal land-grant institution eligible for federal funds when there is a state match, but Missouri has never provided all the money needed for LU's match. Do you believe the state has underfunded LU? What would you do to change that if you believe so? Yes, I believe that we do not treat Lincoln the way that we should. Lincoln is a amazing university who with alumni that has been served in Washington and all over the world in capacities. And so often we treat Lincoln as an afterthought in our community. We don't hear when they have Simone Sanders, who is a senior advisor for Joe Biden's campaign and was national press secretary for Bernie Sanders' 2016 presidential campaign, when she comes and speaks. But we hear when some people out of town start issues at their homecoming concerts. We continue to push negative agendas against Lincoln University and continue to use that divisive statement and comments to divide our community instead of celebrating the amazing university that we have right next door. Lincoln is completely underfunded. When the News Tribune reported that Lincoln may be in danger of closing because they don't have enough money, they're a state-funded university. That is a failure on us. That's a failure on the legislature and a failure on the state government that we're not funding a brilliant university that has helped thousands of students achieve their dreams simply because either we don't care or their football team isn't as good as Mizzou. I don't know, and I hate to put words in somebody's mouth, but it seems to me that when we talk about colleges in Missouri, we focus on University of Missouri, which is an amazing institution,
And sometimes we forget that we have amazing institutions that we live in the shadow of, like Lincoln University.
Dave?
That's really been part of my part of my platform, my campaign, is to really try to get Lincoln University the money they deserve. If we remember back 15 years ago, what Lincoln University was getting was $500,000 when they are due $7 million. We've had conversations, President Woolfolk and her staff and I have had conversations with the budget chair, with Cody Smith, to try and increase that. We actually had made some real strides in that, to where last year they got almost $4 million. This year we were on track to increase that to $6 million. And then COVID-19 happened, and the budget did not allow for that. I think that it's something that I'm concerned about. I'm proud of Lincoln University. I'm proud that I'm a member of the Lincoln University Athletic Club. I was a member of the quarterback club before then. So we've grown that, and we engaged the community, where now last year we had over 400 members of the in the athletic club. And we're engaging more and more people with that and getting them to come out and meet the players, meet the coaches, meet the administrators, and be able to try and find a way that we can make that the gym that we've got. Josh was right. It's a cornerstone in our community and something we should all be proud of. And recruiting inside the state, inside Jefferson City and inside our regional area, that's one area where I think they can improve. And I think that they're looking at doing that.
Okay, thank you. All right, Dave, next question will start with you. The largest employer in District 60 is state government, and its employees are paid the least in the United States. Is this an issue that would be a priority if you're reelected, and how would you address it?
It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing for us to be the last in the entire country in the way that we pay our state employees. Those people are public servants. Many of them do the job that they do for a lot less money than if they went into the private sector. One of my platform when I ran the first time in 2018 was to increase and to get the compensation that our state employees deserve. Because you're right, they are the largest employer in my district, and we need to be able to compensate them for that. The one thing that we have in the state of Missouri that we can also be proud of is we have a balanced budget. And balancing that budget is a real challenge. One of the first areas that is hit is education. The second seems to be state employees. Being able to give them a 3% raise last year was just a drop in the bucket to what they need. We have a lot of people that are on my side of the aisle that's one of the last things that they look at, because state employees are not a big part of their workforce. But we need to look at what they do. In previous administrations that have come through here, and living here as long as I have, one of the first places they cut is state employees. We have to have a certain number of employees to run the state of Missouri, and getting them the compensation they deserve is going to be a challenge, especially with Medicaid expansion. If it's going to cost us $350 million for Medicaid expansion, there are programs that are going to be cut, and one of those programs that are going to be cut, I'm afraid, is going to be our state employee compensation package. In looking at vacancy, not filling vacancies we have right now is a way to be able to mitigate some of that and be able to give some raises to folks. But it's something that I'm concerned about. It's something that I talk to my colleagues about, that I want them to be concerned about as well. And the longer they're here in Jefferson City, the more they see the importance of state employees.
All right. Joshua, same question.
Yes, state worker pay is one of my primary agendas. It is embarrassing that we're 50 out of 50, and it's embarrassing that we've been 50 out of 50 for almost a decade. And I disagree with Dave on this key point. I think that Medicaid expansion is actually a starting point to where we can get money to fund state worker pay. And every single state that's expanded Medicaid has either seen an increase in their budget revenue or a net zero. And most of them saw an increase. Recently, Montana expanded Medicaid, and we were able to get $240 million budget surplus after 1 year. We could take that money and use it to increase state worker pay to competitive levels, so we don't have to worry about people that are retiring and then not being able to fill those positions, or people that start here for 1 year to get the experience and then go to almost any of our 8 neighboring states and double or triple their income. Jefferson City is a company town, and we usually hear that about Detroit or Flint when they talk about car companies. But we're a company town, and our company is the state of Missouri. And every single person in our district either works for the state or knows somebody who does. And currently right now, a family of 4 with 1 working parent qualifies for state benefits. And with COVID-19 causing large amounts of unemployment, that's becoming ever increasingly a problem here in Jefferson City. State worker pay would also help our district. Raising state worker pay would also help our district because every single local business owner knows exactly when state workers get paid because that's their busiest days. So to help our local economy, if we are able to actually compensate state employees properly, it would help our local businesses, increase revenue here, and once again, help create revenue for our state. We talk about balancing the budget, and that's great, but if we have to cut education and state worker pay every single time, how is that balanced? If we can't allow people to live their lives or allow children to pursue their dreams, is that really the balance we want?
All right. Next question. Josh, we'll start with you. The state recently held a special legislative session devoted to addressing violent crime. Do Missouri and Cole County have an issue with violent crime? And if so, how do you believe the legislature should address it?
Yes, we do. Earlier this month, a few weeks ago, we had a shooting at Riverside Park where 2 people were shot and 2 people were injured running and get away. And that's not an isolated incident. Violent crime is an epidemic all over Missouri. It doesn't matter if you're rural or if you're in the cities. We concentrate on the cities for a variety of reasons. And like I said earlier, it fosters an us versus them mentality where we can breed distrust and stop us from working together to find real solutions that benefit all of Missouri. And part of the reason why violent crime is an issue is economics. A lot of people don't have jobs right now. They're under incredible strain. And I hate to keep harping on this, but allowing that $1 billion of state taxpayer money that Washington University says sitting outside of our state because of Medicaid expansion would go a long way to helping us recover from COVID and helping us relieve the strain that people in Jefferson City are facing right now. Violent crime is not isolated incidents. People don't go out wanting to hurt people. They do so because they're scared and they don't know what's going to happen. Living in poverty is like living in the eye of a storm. And you're scared and you don't know what to do, and sometimes they turn to crime. And we have to address these issues by funding programs like Job Search Assistance and transitional housing for people that get out of state penitentiaries, which has proven to stop recidivism and escalation, which is a huge part of violent crime. That's the way that we stop this. We stop this by going to people and working inside our community, working with programs like building community bridges, working with our court systems. That's how we stop violent crime in this community, by working with the community leaders, by working with the police departments, by finding ways to get solutions for our community, and then using those solutions, if we get them works here, to expand to greater Missouri.
Dave, same question.
You talked about special session, and when we got called back into special session, we were called back in to address, the Senate took it on first, to address the 6 issues that the governor had as far as reform in law enforcement. They passed it over on the Senate side overwhelmingly, bipartisan that they did that. Then in between the time that it came from the Senate to our chamber, the governor added one more thing. And by adding one more thing, to where he could allow the Attorney General to go into the city of St. Louis and to prosecute homicide cases, that was more than what the House could swallow. We needed, if we're going to look at all of this legislation that we're going to be able to do, we needed more time to be able to do that. And that's why I think the governor said that he thought that it was a successful special session. I think that there was some meaningful legislation that was passed in there in trying to help protect children. But one of the things that we've done in the time that I've been in the House is that we've been able to make some strides in taking some of that punishment that we have. We have what was used to be called debtor's prison, that if you couldn't pay your fine, you went back to jail. And you stayed in jail until somebody paid your fine for you. And we found a way around that. Nonviolent crimes, being able to address that with less sentencing and rehabilitation programs that we can have to try and address those. The issues that we covered in the special session were important. And I can tell you that the governor told me personally, one of the reasons he wanted to have the special session was because he was tired of going to St. Louis and Kansas City and talking with parents that have had their 4-year-old or 6-year-old child shot. He was tired of going into communities where police officers were shot and having to talk with their families. Those are the reasons he had it. We did make some strides. Is there more to do? Absolutely, there's more to do.
Okay, so I'm going to follow that up then with this question. So, with the special session, the governor sets the agenda. He specifically says what the legislature is able to talk about. If you were setting the agenda to address violent crime, what are the 3 things that you would focus on to be deliberated? Dave, we'll start with you.
Well, I think that we got to try and find a way to get guns out of children's hands. If you live in the inner city, you have a lot of criminals that are hiring 15 and 16-year-olds to stand by them, and that if they get stopped, if they're holding drugs or they're holding a gun, they give it to the juvenile, knowing that the juvenile is not going to be tried, that he's going to be able to get out. So we've got to be able to address that particular crime that we have that's going on. What's going on in the inner cities right now fortunately is not going on so much here in Jefferson City. We do have, and in a recent seminar that I went to with where the Jefferson City Police Department and the FOP talked about what's going on here, we have shootings every day here in Jefferson City. We just don't report it the same way that Columbia reports it. So what we can do internally here in Jefferson City is being able to empower our police force to be able to do the job that they're doing, to give them additional training. I think Post, and I just read in the paper and heard on the news today that Post is implementing de-escalation and additional training for police officers, and I think that's good. More training we can give to our police officers, I think that we set them up for success. And I think the last part of it, I think, is community, to where we can build that relationship between the police force and the community to where we understand what they're going through. The Missouri Highway Patrol last month had a forum that they gave for state legislators to where we could go and we could actually participate in a mock traffic stop that they had. We could also participate in a mock if there were an active shooter in a building, what we would do if we were in that city. And I think if more and more citizens were able to see what our police officers are going through every single day, I think they would better understand the pressure that they're under and be able to understand that when you're making a decision, it's a 10-second decision. It's not one you have a lot of time to contemplate.
Thank you. Joshua?
First and foremost, I think I would advocate for something that the News Tribune editorial recently advocated for, which was universal background checks and closing loopholes on gun shows and internet sales. That is how that is a huge thing, and states that have done that have found gun violence go down 40%. The second thing I would do is provide funding for restorative justice. We too often rely on penalties instead of restoring people and trying to help them recover from drug charges and stuff like that. We have an opioid crisis right now in our state. We have an opioid crisis right now in our state. And how often is violent crime attached to drugs? We also have to focus on equal justice. He says there's issues with guns in the inner cities, and that's true. But there's issues with guns everywhere. There's issue with violence everywhere. We can't just focus on one city, one thing, and put a Band-Aid over the gun violence epidemic that is affecting our state. The third thing I would do is provide community policing plans to help our police officers and our communities get to know each other better outside of crisis situations. I have 2 brothers who are police officers in Memphis. And you're right, there's 10-second situations. But if you're afraid of the community because you do not know them, that 10 seconds is a lot more fraught. It's a lot more dangerous for you. And it's a lot more dangerous for the people that you're supposed to serve and protect as a police officer.
Thank you. Joshua, next question comes from Paul and Sarah Miller. There are no veterans contracted care facilities in Cole County, so veterans, like one of their father, have to stay in private-owned, private-pay facilities where they're unable to use their full VA benefits. What would you do to bring this service, that being contracted care facilities, to Cole County veterans, as well as improve care of veterans overall?
Veterans in our state are facing huge issues right now. Veteran suicides are near record highs. So it's not just their physical health that we're dealing with, but also their mental health. Representative Griffith, veterans is one of his key issues. He is the chair of the Veterans Committee. So I feel like this is an issue we can both agree on. We need to have better care for our veterans and our communities and our state overall. I believe and that requires money. So once again, I hate to keep banging this drum, but using Medicaid expansion as a cornerstone and following the examples that is set in different states where we can gain money, create 16,000 jobs, put 225,000 people that currently don't have health care so they can go to work. They can go to work healthy. They can be more productive, which has proven time and time again to also grow businesses, which will allow more state revenue in our budget to allow us to fund veteran facilities here in Cole County and better fund veteran facilities in our state and nationwide. This is a huge issue. And as I said earlier, we focus a lot of times on their physical health, but not their mental health or their emotional health, which is just as important. We have to stop and realize that these people made ultimate sacrifices for our freedom, and we cannot forget them once they get home. And I feel like oftentimes that happens. And it's not a one party over the other. This happens for both parties. And it needs to stop. And it must stop now. Because the epidemic of veteran suicides and veterans that are not getting health care and veterans that are dying from COVID-19 because of lung issues that they got from exposure to chemicals and exposure to other things while they were deployed is atrocious, and we have to act now, and we have to act swiftly.
Dave, same question.
Well, the Veterans Commission is funded by the Gaming Commission. All the money that comes from that is going to be coming from that. So all the money that we're having, if we want to try and provide assistance to those veterans that live in Jefferson City that are having to go to a private nursing home, and believe me, I've got a number of constituents I can tell you about right now, and the issues they're facing. People, when their loved one goes into skilled nursing, they don't want them to go to Mexico, Missouri. They don't want them to go to St. James. They don't want them to go to Cameron. They want them to stay right here in Jefferson City. But we tried to get Holly Rader tried to get a bill passed this year that would have a voucher that it would be able to be provided to those veterans to be able to stay locally, to utilize those benefits that they were guaranteed when they raised their hand and took the oath that they would be in to serve our country, that they would be guaranteed they would have. But as Joshua said, it all goes back to money. So we got the marijuana money that we got that's going to be coming in, and everybody thinks that's going to be the savior for the entire state, the savior for the Veterans Commission. It's not. It's going to be a drop in the bucket to what is going to be needed. Gaming throughout the entire state is going down every year. It's projected that by 2035, the revenue we're going to be gaining from casinos is going to be almost negligible. So what's the Veterans Commission going to do then? When I'm reelected, one of my first things I'm going to be doing in this next session is looking for alternative funding sources for the Veterans Commission, something that is sustainable, something that is going to be a line item for the Veterans Commission so that they know that when this happens, their money is going to be there. During COVID-19, when everything was shut down, the casinos were shut down, revenue that went to the Veterans Commission was zero. And that's got to change. And I intend to do that. I'm a great advocate for veterans and what they deserve. I fought, they fought, we need to take care of them.
Okay. Dave, next question comes to you. Comes from Scott Randolph. Missouri's tied for third among all states in gun deaths per 100,000 population. This is based on CDC data from 2020. He notes that you voted for legislation that would allow loaded guns to be carried on the Lincoln University campus, co-sponsored a bill that would make it illegal for our local police and sheriff's department to enforce federal gun safety laws, and supported removing restrictions on carrying guns in polling places, daycares, and other sensitive locations. How does expanding the presence and availability of weapons in our community make us safer? And what legislation would you propose to ensure dangerous persons do not have access to guns and to reduce gun violence in our state?
Well, let me answer your second question first, because there's no way we can guarantee that. We can't legislate that the bad guys are not going to get guns. They're going to get guns. I think it's pretty common knowledge that I'm a strong Second Amendment supporter. I think that we've got to be, and that's a given right that we have in our Constitution, to be able to protect ourselves. And if we're going to send our children to a campus, whether it be Lincoln University, the University of Missouri, or wherever, and have them be susceptible to rape, to be susceptible to violence, and not be able to protect themselves, that doesn't stand in line with the Second Amendment. We've got to be able to have those rights. Education on how to use a weapon, on how to effectively protect yourself. Those are things that need to be done. My wife just took the conceal and carry class. She learned an awful lot more than just how to fire a gun and more than just being able to carry that conceal and carry permit. She learned when to use a gun and how to use a gun. And if her life was in danger, and she has learned how she can protect herself. If my child were going to go to a university and they wanted to carry a weapon, first I would make sure they knew how to use it and make sure that they were adult enough to be able to do that. But we can't legislate good behavior. We can't do that. And I think that being able to taking guns away from people is not the answer. Because as I said in the beginning, if you take guns away from good people, only the bad people are going to have them, and how are you going to protect yourself?
Joshua?
My stepfather lost his arm in a gun accident when he was 10 years old. I grew up with a living reminder on the dangerous power of guns. My stepfather was also an avid hunter. So I grew up with guns in the house, but I learned how to respect the power of firearms. I will never advocate to take away guns from people. I have a friend who says Democrats don't want your guns. We have our own here in Missouri because we like to hunt, we like to fish, and we like to go to shooting ranges. But what we want is for them to not be in the hands of children, to them not be used on campus, to do the things that he's worried about. When guns are allowed on campus, they could be used to intimidate and used to hurt the people that he's saying he wants to protect, victims of rape. We have to realize two things. Yes, the talking point is the only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. But if we can stop bad guys from getting a gun by closing gun show loopholes, by closing internet sale loopholes, by making it harder for bad guys to get a gun, then that's a victory. That's a way that we can legislate gun violence without having to worry about changes people's behavior. We can see their behavior and then act with that. Currently, there's a bill right now that's been passed along, and passed along because of COVID, that would stop domestic abusers from being able to get guns. When a lot of times, those guns are used against the people that they abuse. We have to stop pretending that more guns is the solution, because it's not, and it never has been. when we when we limit sales, when we do smart legislative decisions and make it harder for bad guys to get guns, gun violence goes down, as I said earlier, by 40%. And that means 40% more children will be able to live in their cities. 40% more people in our community will be able to be safe from gun violence. And that's something we can legislate, and something I will legislate when I'm elected in November.
All right. Josh, I'll start this question with you. You've mentioned Medicaid expansion several times. In August, voters approved expansion in Medicaid. How would you implement Medicaid expansion, and how would you cover the state share of the funding, given the state has a balanced budget?
Currently, right now, our state pays roughly 17 to 24% of Medicaid costs per patient. Medicaid expansion will streamline that to 10%, while allowing federal money to come into our state, which has, like as I said previously, has proven in almost every single state to increase revenue. The second thing that Medicaid expansion does is that it increases word of productivity. It allows people to have more spending money so they can spend in their communities and help local businesses, and it can also, once again, create revenue. Missouri right now has one of the lowest corporate tax rates in the nation, if not the lowest. I have not checked recently. Yet we're not getting businesses in, and one of the reasons why is because our healthcare system is basically non-existent in rural areas. We see rural hospitals closing all the time. And we can blame COVID for this, but COVID is not the cause of this system. It is symptoms of our broken system. Medicaid expansion is an extremely personal issue to me. I lost my younger brother in March of last year because he could not afford medication for anti-seizure medication, and he died from a seizure. And to say that this is all because we can't fund it is just 100% misleading and false. For 10 years, we could have got it for absolutely nothing that our federal government would pay for. And it was never passed by the supermajority because President Obama's name was attached to it. Healthcare should be a bipartisan issue. It should be across the aisle. We should be able to take care of our working poor. But we don't. And as I said earlier, a family of 4 with one working parent in our state qualifies for benefits, qualifies for Medicaid. And if they can't go to the doctor and they miss work or they get fired, our entire state hurts if that's an important, because every single thing we do, the state of Missouri, the employees of the state of Missouri affect that. They affect our everyday lives. And if they can't do their jobs because they're sick or there's somebody there, then we all fail as a state.
Dave, same question.
Well, I'm going to respond much the same way I have before. It seems like that Medicaid is going to be the answer. Medicaid expansion is going to be the answer to all of our budget problems, and it's not. It's an unfunded mandate, pure and simple. And if the supermajority were to try and pass something in through the House and through the Senate that's not funded, we would be raked over the coals for it. If you want to look at states that wish they would not have done Medicaid expansion, we don't have to go very far. We can go down to Arkansas. You ask Arkansas how they feel about Medicaid expansion. They're looking at ways that they can get out of it now. Yeah, I have colleagues that I sit with on the floor that are part of the Southern Legislative Conference that travel around to other states that have had Medicaid expansion and talk about the loopholes that are there and how they wish they would not have done it. We are blessed in the state of Missouri that we do have a balanced budget. We're not like Illinois. We're not like California, where we just print more money. We just borrow more money, and it's all on the shoulders of our grandchildren, our grandchildren's grandchildren. When Cody Smith stood up on the floor and he said if Medicaid expansion would have had a funding mechanism with it, it would have been good. If you take $10 billion of our $30 billion that's paying for Medicaid right now, and you've got almost a sixth of our entire population in the state that's on Medicaid, and now with Medicaid expansion, they're not only going to take those poor that need to have medical care, but they're going to be able to take those that are underinsured and put them on Medicaid. And so at the end of the day, we've got so much money that's in that pie. That pie is only so big, and you can only slice it so many times. And so we've got to find a way that we can pay for that. And that's going to be a real challenge for us in this next budget session.
All right.
Can I rebut one point, please?
No, we're going to go on to our next question. Today, and this starts with Dave. Today, Missouri reported an increase of more than 1,500 confirmed cases of COVID-19 and the highest number of hospitalizations to date. How do you rate the state's response to the pandemic, and what additional steps should be taken going forward?
Me?
Yes.
Well, I think that if we go back and remember what we were told back in March, and I think the governor said it, and maybe Director Williams said it, but they said that the more people that we test, the more positives we're going to come up with. And as the numbers were early on in March and in April, when we weren't testing that many people, as those tests increased and we got more testing stations, especially here in Jefferson City, where we've got multiple testing stations where they can go to. If you drive down Jefferson Street or Madison Street, the line can be backed up all the way to Freeman Mortuary, many times where people are trying to get tested. One thing about COVID-19, one thing about a pandemic, is that there is not a playbook that's been given. There was nothing, no script that was written for us to be able to know exactly what's the right thing to do. And I believe that our governor has done the best that he can do. I think that what he's looked at and how he's looked at how we can mitigate this pandemic, I think he should be applauded for it. Because he's done everything that he can, and now he's even experienced it himself. He and his wife have experienced it himself. So they know firsthand what it's all about. But I think being safe, wearing masks, if you go into a business that they request you do that you social distance, that you take care of your fellow man, these are things that I think we've learned from the pandemic and learned from COVID-19 that we're going to take with us into the future. And have we done a good job? Perhaps. Could we have done a better job? Perhaps. But I think given the circumstances that we're in right now, I think we're going to see those numbers go down. I think we've maxed where we're going to go. The number of people we've got in our IC units throughout the state is going down. Are there deaths? There certainly are. But the way we report those deaths is changing, and I think we can. I think we've done a good job.
Joshua?
It's poor. What we were told was March turns out to be lies. And President Trump confirmed that to Bob Woodard, and I don't know if that's where Governor Parson was getting his information from, but it turns out that was false. We were told this disease would go away in April. We were told it would go away in May. We were told it would go away in June. And now we're saying that we might magically get a vaccine in October. The issue is this. Yes, pandemics don't come with the playbook, but we had a system in place that was put together by George W. Bush, strengthened by President Obama, and then gutted by President Trump. Governor Parson has consistently downplayed the importance of masks. He has been shown several times in public not wearing a mask. So to say that he's been set a good example is also false. My thoughts and prayers are with his wife, because COVID is a very serious disease which has killed nearly 2,000 Missourians already. Over 200,000 Americans in our nation. I'm a contractor for UCA. My employer is the federal government. We have not been doing in-person interviews since end of February. They knew how serious this was, and they tried to protect the people that work for them while telling everyone else it was okay to go out. And the misconception that more tests cause more positive cases is just false. More tests allows us to see more positive cases, but that allows us to treat cases earlier. Instead of in March when we didn't have proper testing, and these positive cases were not able to test, and they were able to spread and continue to spread to the people, to the community around them. Yes, masks are important. Social distance is important. But COVID-19 does not care who you are, how you vote, how much money we have. We saw it with the President of the United States, who got it as well, and had somewhat severe symptoms. that we have to take this seriously, and we should have taken it seriously from the very beginning, and Governor Parson and the state legislature refused to do so. They were handing out Corona six-packs with masks on them on the House floor while Joe Runyons, a representative from Kansas City, was fighting for his life. We have not taken this as seriously as we should, and we have to start taking this seriously, but I'm afraid it could be too late, and I just hope it's not. I pray it's not.
All right, next question. Josh, it starts with you. A legislative debate often exists as to when things should be left to local control. For instance, during the last 2 years, the debate has risen over a St. Louis minimum wage, regulation of confined animal feeding operations, and mask mandates. When should the state step in on issues such as these, and when should it be left to local control?
The state should step in if the local control is outside of the Missouri Constitution. In issues like controlled animal feeding operations, aka factory farms, when the state is not in those local communities, they are not dealing with the children that are suffering from health problems coming because of unregulated chemicals coming out of chicken farms, large chicken operations, or feeding operations. If we look just at our closest neighbor in Iowa, controlled operated CAFOs have destroyed their water table, poisoned their water, and caused people to get multiple sicknesses. Health problems are linked to that consistently. The St. Louis minimum wage, that was approved by St. Louis voters. You're taking away their right to vote. You're just like we're doing when we're trying to when we took away 1.4 million Missourians' will with trying to amend Clean Missouri. This is an ongoing issue that we see. In the special session, the concurrent jurisdiction for Prosecutor Kim Gardner was once again trying to take away the power of the voter. We have to stop that. If it's not violating the Missouri Constitution, the state legislature should not superimpose their will on local communities who are there and who vote and represent the community and know what's going on in their communities when we don't, oftentimes here in Jefferson City.
Dave, same question.
Well, I want to address one of the last things he said about concurrent jurisdiction. We didn't even address that. That was not brought up on the House floor at all. It was not even discussed. When you talk about local control, I think we're all in favor of local control to an extent. What happens in a lot of counties that we have around the state of Missouri is that we have individual personalities that get involved in decision making. CAFOs is a prime example. CAFOs, and when we went on a freshman tour, we visited a CAFO up near Havas. That's one of the safest places to be and to raise animals. Before you can even go into that CAFO, you've got to take off all your clothes, you've got to shower, you've got to put on protective clothing, because if you went in there and you got a simple cold, you can wipe out that entire population of animals that's in there. When you come out, you do the same thing. As far as the refuse that comes from there, those are improving almost every day in the way that they can mitigate any of that pollution that is happening. And many of those pollution concerns that a lot of communities have been unfounded, have been where they've been able to find that they're really not that close to where to their neighbors or where they are. What it all boils down to is that a lot of those farmers that are in those areas, they're concerned that they're not getting the same kind of revenue that their neighbors are. This farm that's up in Havas is a family. It's a mom, a dad, there are 3 kids. I mean, it's a family operation. Agriculture is the #1 industry in the state of Missouri. We've got to find ways that we can not take down hurdles for our farmers, and ways that we can be able to help them to make a living and to pass those farms on down to their children.
All right, let's go to closing statements. The ground rules we'd set out had specified 1 minute for closing statements. I'm going to alter that and give you 2 minutes for that closing statement. So, Dave, we'll start with you.
Okay. Well, thank you for having this forum. I really appreciate an opportunity to be able to speak to my constituents and to be able to tell them what my ideas are and how much of a pleasure it really is to be able to serve as your legislator. After I served for 1 year, many of my friends came to me and they said, Dave, what was the biggest surprise that you had? And the biggest surprise that I had was that on the House floor, when we are debating and we're pointing fingers at each other and we're talking in loud voices, when the question is called and we vote, after that vote is taken, we walk across the aisle and shake hands or give each other hugs because we have established a relationship with each other. We have respect for each other. We generally like each other. I can tell you that Lakeisha Bosley, who's a representative of the St. Louis area, when I had my Veterans Treatment Court bill, if it wasn't for her, I might not have gotten that passed because Lakeisha came to me across the aisle and said, what can I do to help? And she went to some of her friends over in the Senate and talked with them to get that passed through the Senate to come across. So the way that we can work together is a strong suit that I think that I've got in the way that I can build relationships with people. I've been supported by the Missouri Right to Life, by the Fraternal Order of Police, by the Educators Association, by the NRA. But all those endorsements, I mean, they're great. But what I really want to do is I want to serve my fellow man. And I want to be able to make the best decisions that I can make for you in the coming year. And I think that I can do that because of the position that I have and the background that I have and the maturity that I bring to the office. And I would certainly appreciate your vote on November 3rd.
Thank you. Joshua.
Thank you so much for giving us a chance to speak, Editor Castor. Thank you, Rebecca, for keeping us on time and keeping us on track. And thank you to the people of Jefferson City for tuning in and hoping to become informed and try to make the best decision possible for the people of Jefferson City in November. Jefferson City is an amazing place. I moved here 4 years ago because I wanted to see how government worked after the election because I was scared and I was worried. I sat in the gallery and I watched the lawmakers. I watched the supermajority steamroll over dissenting voices by calling to previous question almost immediately while representatives are still waiting to speak. I sat with representatives on both sides of the aisle who talk about frustrations of stuff that maybe they can't do because a lot of times their voices are stifled because the supermajority does not allow dissent. We have to stop this. We have to make sure that the voice of the people is being heard on the House floor. We need more than greetings from the fourth floor of the Capitol. We have to have somebody who fights for Jefferson City on the House floor every single day, who every single time that they can will advocate for increased state worker pay. Every time they can, speak for the will of the people, for the will of the voiceless. Too many people live in the shadow of the Capitol but do not feel represented in our community, and I've talked to a lot of them. I'm not going to tell you all the endorsements that I have because that's less important than the people that I've talked to and the people that tell me that I have their vote. I would love your vote, and I would promise that I will earn it every single day that I'm up on the House floor. Every single day, I will work as hard as I can, tirelessly as I can, to make sure that your voice is being heard, and that the will of the voter is done, and that the will of the people of Jefferson City is felt at the Capitol. Once again, thank you so much for allowing us a chance to speak.
On behalf of the News Tribune, I'd like to thank the candidates for participating in this forum. I'd also like, again, to thank Jefferson City and JCTV staff for their assistance in holding and broadcasting it. In addition to a story about this forum in tomorrow's News Tribune, we plan to ask these candidates several of the questions that we couldn't get to tonight, and we will then publish them in Sunday's News Tribune. As part of our continuing election coverage, we have written dozens of stories about races such as this one, as well as issues that voters will see on the November 3rd ballot. On our website, you'll find previously published stories at newstribune.com/election. Now through Election Day, we'll be adding to that coverage, culminating in the publication of a voter's guide on Sunday, November 1st. I would encourage you who are listening to realize that you can participate in the coverage by submitting questions for these candidates, other candidates that are running in this election. It's as simple as dropping us an email at vote@newstribune.com. We'll gather their answers and then publish them for you. At each of these forums, I try to conclude it with the same idea. Our society is served best by an informed and active electorate. Please take advantage of these resources I've shared and then get out to vote November 3rd. Good night.